is outrageous that we're watching the decimation of a 2-decade tradition.
It was a defining moment in Arizona's 2022 race for governor. Republican candidate Kari Lake had just learned that her Democratic opponent, Katie Hobbs, was getting a televised one-on-one interview on Arizona PBS that Hobbs wasn't entitled to under debate rules. Hobbs, you'll recall, rejected a formal PBS debate with Lake. Now, 3 years later, we're learning about the debate backstory, thanks to emails obtained by Arizona Republic reporter Stacey Bartschinger. Republican Senate President Warren Petersen believes those emails show ASU and President Michael Crow and his team engaged in, quote, viewpoint discrimination. Petersen's calling on the Federal Communications Commission to revoke ASU's license to run the PBS station. So, does Senate President Warren Petersen, who is running for Attorney General, by the way, have a case against ASU? Our politics panel steps in with some answers. Democratic consultant Dawn Penich of Agave Strategy. She's worked on the ballot initiative that blocked the initial expansion of school vouchers. And Trey Terry, a Republican consultant, Goodyear City Council member, and former school board president. Welcome back to Square Off.
Thanks for having us.
I bring up your relevant education credentials because I want to go back to the school funding ruling and get your take on it. Where do you think, well, let me put, you were on the Agua Fria School Board.
Correct.
How are you affected by this?
So we are greatly affected. I do want to make something very clear. What the judge ruled is not that schools are underfunded. It's the structure. It's that the schools, especially when it comes to capital funding, are not structured and uniform as prescribed within the state constitution. And so what that means is you have rapidly growing school districts like mine out in the West Valley, like others on the outskirts of the valley, some rural districts that cannot build classrooms fast enough. They are not getting proper funding from the state, from the school's facility district. And a lot of that comes from a formula that hasn't been updated in decades. We're still dealing with formulas that were devised in the 80s and 90s and no major updates since. And Bram, I know you've reported on other school districts that are finding ways to spend their bond dollars, putting out perhaps loans to other districts that are in financial trouble, or even building housing developments and other development projects. The way we fund schools is what's at issue with this. And I long argued that we're doing it improperly. It's not a lack of funding, it's how we're funding it.
Dawn, we brought up vouchers. Joe Dana did at the end of that story. How do you see that playing into this, if at all?
Well, I'll take a little bit of issue with my colleague here and say that the ruling found that the legislature is failing at their mandate to fund schools, even with the formula as it is. They are failing by billions of dollars, and that impacts growth, and it also impacts thousands of rural schools and schools in other communities. What is not a mandate for the legislature to fund is a ballooning voucher system. That is something the legislature has chosen to do at the expense of something they are supposed to do, something the Constitution says they have to do, which is make sure that all Arizona schools can operate without a roof leaking on the students, without a sinkhole in the playground. I have been inside of schools all across this state, and the system of haves and have-nots, the disparities because of the legislature's failure to fund, is shocking. And now an Arizona judge has also said it's illegal.
So it appears Republicans in the legislature are going to appeal this ruling, which means this could drag on for a few years. Is a possible resolution putting this to voters in a Prop 123 next year sometime as part of that?
I think that would get messy. This is going to be appealed. It's going to take a couple years to fully get resolved. That's why I don't put any credence in any calls for a special session right now. But this will take a while. But I will want to point out that this ruling didn't have any impact with ESAs, and since universal ESAs have been enacted in Arizona, we have set records each year in our public school funding. Each year we are putting the money there. The problem is the structure in how we fund our public schools, and if we just throw more money at a bad structure, I don't think that solves the problem.
Well, 80% of Arizona families continue to choose their local public schools, and so if we want to, respond to supply and demand here. But one thing I'll say is that while the appeals process and figuring this out could take years, what wouldn't take years is the legislature coming right back into session in January an election year and deciding where we spend our existing dollars. They can make a decision that starts to chip away at this multi-billion-dollar illegal problem starting in January.
Okay, got to move on. I'm going to let folks know right now we're not getting to the Donald Trump as a part of the discussion I hope to get to, because this went on longer, but a very good discussion. Let's go back to Warren Petersen. Senate President wants ASU to lose its PBS license over what happened in 2022 in the debate. Should ASU lose its license?
I think that in terms of the FCC complaint and the license, I'm not hearing anybody say, other than Donald Trump, that PBS and Arizona has consistently violated their requirements for equal time, bringing unbiased information to their audiences. This one incident, I think there's some pretty clear questionable comments from the very top, but one incident does not a license revocation demand. And this is a matter of timing, right? We now have a president who is going after this exact media entity, and this is fuel for that fire, unfortunately. And as you mentioned, we have an elected official who wants to dog whistle to the base that he's going to need next year, and calling up election denialism and, you know, problems with the media only feeds his campaign as well. And we have to admit that that's part of this timing.
Okay, there is an issue. As Donald Trump has shown, he'll go after schools, and he's gone after PBS, so that is, it puts ASU in a precarious position. Want to point out one of the emails from Michael Crow said, we need people who believe in elections as participants. That's viewed as viewpoint discrimination.
Yeah, I think Senate President Petersen is correct to draw attention to this. I would point out the timing of this is because ASU held on to public records for over 2 years.
3 years, actually.
3 years. So that's the reason why we're just now getting to this. And it is viewpoint discrimination. Look, I've long been critical of Kari Lake when it comes to the election denialism stuff. I think it's been an issue with our party for a long time here in the state, and hopefully we're getting around that. But this is an issue of fairness. PBS takes public taxpayer dollars. The reason public media exists is to not pick which views can go where, making those editorial decisions. There are some serious questions here, and whether or not they lose the license, that's a very high bar, but there certainly needs to be more eyeballs on this.
Got to end it there. Dawn Penich, Trey Terry, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And that's our show for this week. Thanks very much to all of our guests. Thank you so much for joining us. See you back here next weekend for another round of Sunday Square Off.